I think the core thing to say is what we're talking about today is the practice of collaboration, not a program. It's not a program, it's not a policy, it's not another initiative. It's actually the core interpersonal dynamic.
It's not a destination.
Yeah, the process in a way has been the outcome.
Yep.
And that, you know, really arguably is the biggest collaboration challenge in Australia. We haven't cracked it yet, and we're still working on it.
And we thought we'd, you know, we have all these people calling us emergent change agents, so we thought, we'll go see these fellas, they'll give us the good oil, you know. Social leadership, they do this stuff, we'll figure out how to change the world. And when we got there, we found out, oh, crikey, this is tougher than it looks. These poor fellas are trying to do this stuff. And we put them through the ringer. Yeah, we gave the white fellas a poor hard time. But yeah, and we gave each other a hard time in search of, because change is always harder than it looks. And as we pressed into this process, we were kind of pressing into ourselves at the same time.
Yeah, so at that time I was with social leadership, which I had been for the past 8 years. And I was in a bit of a different role at that time. So I was one of the facilitators with Jeff and another colleague. And I think what we start to see fairly quickly in it that we fell into a number of the traps that we see much more broadly around what's going on. And when we came out of that headland process, which was 3 years with 20 Indigenous leaders, we then went, what is it that we're seeing everywhere else in the other work that we're doing, which is trying to bring black and white together? And we kind of saw 3 key areas of the traps that we fall into about approaching this dynamic as a problem, as something that we need to fix, which immediately sets up a different power dynamic. And that, you know, pretty much everybody trying to do something in that space has been put through the ringer, like Grant was saying, that it's exhausting. We can't sustain that we end up teetering from hope and despair. And we have very, very high expectations for what we can achieve in that space. And we have really low expectations about our capability to do it. And that kind of constant moving between the two is exhausting.
And from an Indigenous perspective, we're also conscious of the fact that we're burying relatives too soon, too often, and we go shopping for who's got the best skills or tools to help us get that much more effective, to make that much more of an impact to mitigate the sort of stuff we're dealing with at the community. So we're moving from hope and despair all the time, thinking, have you white fellas got what we're looking for or not? Because we need to go out and to go home and do change. And so there was that kind of dynamic as well that was playing out.
So we were working with this framework around really trying to understand through lost conversations what happens with that dance across power, where in many ways you could say in that dynamic as white non-Indigenous people, we had mainstream rank in that. And as SLA, we had positional rank. But in that context, the people we were working with, the Indigenous leaders, completely outranked us with the psychological rank and spiritual rank. And we thought this was really interesting, that move between this is happening all the time as we come together, government, communities, NGOs try and work together, that conversation about who's holding the power and where does it lie is never really had. We don't talk about power across black and white because it's a very difficult, painful subject. But I
was going to say, in the process while we were there, we're unaware of our own power. So psychological and spiritual power is fluffy in our thinking because all we know that was we don't have enough, there's not enough, material wealth or aspect or power and rank to address the social determinants of health. So we're thinking very abstract, or concrete, about what we need to do to fix stuff. So we want things in our hands to fix, we want the positional rank and we want the kind of tools that we think we'll need to fix our stuff, all the time being unaware of the rank that we're using and wielding in the process to either help or frustrate the process.
What we're trying to say through the lost conversations is about yes, you know, there are cultural protocols that have to be followed and that we need to be aware of. And we also need to be, approach it like any relationship and work together. And I mean, that sounds really obvious, but we haven't. You know, and remove that fear of getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing, going in and being open and participating, not spectating. I think this has been a big spectator sport. And I can say that of having been a spectator and not knowing how to participate and finding a way from your role from the organization about what does that look like to step into it, knowing that we'll get it wrong and we're going to work it through and to be willing to take those risks. And actually, one of the things we haven't said is that seeing this as a skill. I mean, this is a competency that we haven't learned yet collectively. If we'd learned it, we'd be doing it. And I think what I've seen is when I talk to people about this being something that's a competency and an awareness that, you know, as a country we haven't got nationally yet, there's a relief. You know, it doesn't mean that I'm got it wrong. It doesn't mean that I'm, you know, there's something wrong with me, that I'm not able to move through. It means something I can learn and I can build that awareness. And there is a way through. And perhaps that's all the message of what we're saying is. There's a way through. We're not saying it's the answer, but it's how do we collaborate and have a relationship.